With 360 cameras, the crucial factor that may determine whether you buy a camera or not is its stitching capability. In this video, I'm going to compare the stitching of the Insta360 One X, the Insta360 One X2 and the Insta360 One R. And I'm going to look at 4 different areas. 1 where I'm purposely disrupting the stitch line. 2 where the camera is mounted close to an object. 3 where the camera is mounted on a selfie stick. And 4 where the camera is being used in harsh sunlight. Problems with stitching obviously usually occur around the stitching area of the camera, so this is why usually we try to avoid this area. So let's start with the most challenging test for these cameras, and that's to purposely disrupt that stitch line. So I'm going to walk along the stitch line starting at a distance of 4 meters and then moving 1 meter at a time until I eventually get to half a meter away from the camera. All 3 cameras are fairly equal from a stitching point of view at 4 meters and 3 meters. When we get to the 2 meter mark, my face on the One R and the One X starts to ghost a bit and isn't stitching very well. At the 1 meter marker, all 3 cameras do show stitching errors, but the One X2 holds up the best. And at half a meter away, the stitching, all things considered, is quite good, and I think this shows just how far the stitching software has moved forward over the years. The One X2 though does come out on top with the most natural shaped face and the consistency of stitching. The One X has given me an alien head and has squashed my eyes closer together. My head isn't that big in real life. In terms of stitching the 2 images from the lenses together, the One R has done a really good job considering that the lenses are a lot further apart. My face and body are squashed, but this is a result of the algorithm having to work really hard because of the wider body of the camera, and it has to find a compromise between something that's stitched well and something that looks natural, and I think it's actually done a really good job of finding that compromise. Carrying on with purposely disrupting the stitch line, when I bring my hands closer to the camera lenses, all 3 cameras do struggle at various points. The One X2 does the best job throughout the entire movement and holds the hands together quite well. The One X comes in second, and as expected here, I think the One R is last, and it starts cutting my fingers off sooner than the other cameras, and the distortion is more extreme. If we put the One X and the One X2 side by side in this test, I think the results are pretty close. When these cameras are close to the surface of an object such as a table in this next test, this is where the camera can really struggle at stitching around the base of the camera. This mosaic table is actually a brilliant demonstration of how good the stitching is in all 3 of these cameras, and if you follow the stitch line out from the middle to the edge of the table, the stitching of the mosaic pattern is pretty consistent. The worst stitching, as expected, is again the One R. At first glance the pattern appears perfect as it moves outwards, but if you look closer, it's extended the width of the squares in order to stitch them so they appear natural, but it has done a really good job. With the One R, the circle has been squashed in the middle the most out of all 3 cameras, with the lines not quite joining up properly. The One X2 is the best stitch line by a mile. The circle in the middle is less elliptical than the other 2, and the tripod is almost complete. The mosaic pattern is pretty much perfect. And the One X is a good second place. All the squares have kept their shape, but a few of them are slightly soft along the stitch line as you move outwards. And the circle in the middle is slightly squashed, but the lines all meet up nicely. The stitching weaknesses of a 360 camera also show up around the hand when we're holding a selfie stick, so this is another good test that we'll do next. In this test, the One R again comes in 3rd place, with that wider body making it almost impossible to give us a complete hand, instead stitching 2 halves together quite badly. This is followed by the One X, which is pretty good, but there is a slight ghosting effect at the edge of the hand where the stitching isn't quite there. The One X2 is the clear winner again. The hand is slightly squashed, but it looks the most natural out of all 3 cameras. The final area where stitching can suffer is in harsh sunlight. And with the One X, you're left with this ugly divide along the stitch line which separates the images from the 2 lenses. The One R actually isn't a lot better, and you can still clearly identify the stitch line, and there's a big difference with the colour and sharpness either side of the stitch line from each lens. You can still see a difference with the 1x2, but I think what it's done well is it's blended the differences between the lenses more effectively, and the stitch line isn't always as easy to spot. I think these test results are really interesting, and if you own any of these three cameras, you wouldn't be disappointed with what we've just seen. And in fact, if you own the 1R, these results are really encouraging, because the 1R does have the wider body, but in all of these test results it's held up really well. And that is down to how effective the Insta360 dynamic stitching algorithm is in both the app and in the studio software. The one thing that really did stick out to me aside from the stitching was how much better the images were with the 1x2 compared to the 1x. Let me know in the comments what you think of these test results. You can watch these two videos next. My name's Rich, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.